Section 1.2 is titled Adding Integers. So our standard or I can statement, remember this does not need to be written into your notebook, but it's standard 7C1. And by the end of the lesson, you should be able to add rational numbers, explain the additive inverse property, and also use real-world context to interpret sums of rational numbers. And in our case today, the rational numbers that we're dealing with are strictly integers. So no decimals and no fractions yet. So first, some vocabulary terms. An integer, which is a definition from previous notes, but I do want you to write it down again, just to kind of help ingrain that into your memory. But an integer is any number from the set -3 to 3. So notice that 0 is included, as well as any positive or negative whole numbers. So again, no decimals and no fractions yet. Opposites are two numbers with the same absolute value with opposite signs. So an example of a set of opposites would be -2 and 2. The absolute value of -2 and +2 is both 2, and they do have opposite signs, one negative, one positive. Another example of opposites could be -517 and +517. So think of an example on your own, maybe what your favorite number is, and its opposite. Additive inverses are the integer and its opposite. So whether it's positive, then it's the negative, or the negative and the positive. And one important piece of an additive inverse, it'll be two numbers whose sum, remember that means to add, two numbers whose sum is, and let's think about this for a minute, what happens when you add -2 plus 2? Or what happens when you add -517 to +517? What do you get? Hopefully 0. So additive inverses are two numbers whose sum is 0. So let's talk about two cases. We have adding integers with the same sign that we'll talk about first. So when you add integers that have the same sign, you're essentially adding the absolute values of the numbers. Then if they're positive, your answer should be positive. And if they were negative, then your answer should be negative. So when you add integers with the same sign, your answer should also have that same sign, positive or negative. This is an informational type slide that kind of walks you through maybe steps to solve a problem, and these are steps that should be written into your notebooks. So let's look at some examples. In number 1, we have -2 plus -4. So they're both negative. We know that our answer is going to be negative. And since it's addition, you just add the two numbers in your head. 2 and 4 is 6, so our answer is -6. Now it talked in the last slide about finding their absolute values, and that's part that maybe you're doing in your head. But essentially, if you take the absolute value of both of these numbers, the absolute value of -2 plus the absolute value of -4, you get 2 plus 4. And that's where that idea came from in my head, where I said, well, you're just adding 2 and 4 to get 6, and then you make your answer negative. Number 2, this is the type of addition you've been doing for a long time, adding two positive numbers. 8 plus 1, also going to be a positive answer, is 9. Number 3, we have -3 plus -6, so those are both negative numbers. Our answer should be negative. And again, if you think about adding the absolute values of these two, you're essentially just adding 3 and 6, and that gives you 9. So the answer here is -9. Examples should all be written into your notes with the answers also included. If you'd like to pause the video here and try 4, 5, and 6 on your own and then check with what I've done. -8 plus -2. Numbers are both negative, so your answer should be negative, and 8 plus 2 is 10. 5, we have -1 and -12, so our answer should be negative. 1 plus 12 is 13. Number 6, we're adding two positive numbers. Again, this is the type of addition you've been doing for a long time. 5 plus 4, that should be a positive 9. Okay, so the second case is we add integers that have different signs or opposite signs. So when you're adding numbers that have different signs, in your head, you're essentially subtracting them first. And then to determine whether your answer is positive or negative, you look at the larger number. So again, this is another informational type slide where all of this should be written into your notes. This will help you later if you're going to work on your homework or the worksheet, the practice problems, and you can't remember what you do when integers have different signs. This is where you would refer back to. So we subtract the numbers, and your answer will take the sign of the bigger number. So some examples, 7 and 8. These problems actually look very similar, both 9s and 4s, except we're just alternating or switching the positive and the negative. So we'll start with number 7. We have a positive 9 and a negative 4. So in our head, we're going to subtract 9 or 4 from 9. So 9 minus 4 in our head is 5. Now the question is our answer positive or negative? So we look back at the original problem. 9 is bigger than 4, 9 is positive, so our answer is positive. Number 8, we have negative 9 plus 4. So now we have positive 4 and a negative 9. Again, we're going to subtract the numbers. 9 minus 4, again, is still 5. But this time, the answer is going to be negative, and that's because the 9 is bigger than the 4, and the 9 is negative. So our answer is negative. If you'd like to pause the video and try these two on your own, and then check your work. 12 plus negative 6, we have opposite signs, a positive 12 and a negative 6. So you're going to subtract the two numbers in your head. 12 minus 6 is 6, and our answer is positive because the 12 is larger than 6 and 12 is positive. Number 10, we have negative 7 plus 5. So our signs are opposite. We have a negative and a positive, so we're going to subtract them in our head, so that's a 2. But our answer takes the sign of the bigger number, so negative 2. The additive inverse property. The additive inverse property says the sum of any number and its additive inverse, or its opposite, is 0. And this is what we discussed a little earlier when we were going through vocab. Anytime you see kind of a generalized statement here like this that has variables in it, I'll explain what that means, but it does need to be written into your notes. Essentially what I'm saying, let's say that a is any integer. Well, if you take that integer and its opposite, and here it's negative a, you should get 0. So this is kind of like the generalized statement for the additive inverse property. Then below here I have a few specific examples, 8 plus negative 8, and negative 3 plus 3. Doesn't matter which one comes first, the positive or the negative, but when you add a number to its inverse or its opposite, when you add a number to its opposite or its additive inverse, you should get 0. And then the last two examples, still addition, still adding integers, but now we're adding more than one. Remember, with addition we work from left to right. So if you want to take a minute and write these down, I've had my classes try to work these out on their own. But if we work from left to right, so negative 6 plus negative 15, that's two negatives. I know the answer is going to be negative, and I should be adding those two numbers together. So 6 plus 15 is 21, and I should get a negative 21 because they're both negative. And now I'm going to bring down the plus 7. Negative 21 plus 7. Now we have opposite signs, so in your head you're subtracting. 21 minus 7 is 14, and your answer should be negative because 21 is larger than 7 and 21 is negative. The last example, working from left to right, 7 plus negative 1, so those have opposite signs, so you're subtracting to get 6, and it should be positive because the 7 is bigger than the 1. I'm going to bring the rest of the problem down. Plus 26 plus negative 13. Now I'm going to do 6 plus 26. Those are both positives. We get 32, and I'm bringing down plus negative 13. Now I have two numbers whose signs are opposite. I have a positive 32 and a negative 13, so in my head now I will be subtracting them. 32 minus 13 is 19, and my answer should be positive because the 32 is bigger and 32 is positive. You'll notice as you went through these notes that oftentimes when a number is negative, you'll see me put it in parentheses, and that's just so that negative really stands out to you. Sometimes it looks funny when you see an addition sign and then a negative number right behind it without parentheses. I won't always do that, but at least initially so that you know you're looking out for negative numbers. In class, we'll work on worksheet 1-2.